We're on Mishnah Yud Zayin, the penultimate Mishnah of the first parak of Pirkei Avot. So let's see. Shimon b'no Omer. Shimon, his son, says, the son of Rabban Gamliel, the author of the previous Mishnah. So Shimon b'no Omer, Kol yamai gadati ben hachachamim, velo matzati laguf tov mishtika. I spent my whole life among the chachamim, among the sages, and I found nothing better for the body than silence. Velo hamidrash hu ikar el ha'maaseh. And learning, study, is not the main thing, but rather it is its action. V'chol hamarbe dvarim mevichet. And anyone who speaks excessively brings sin. So first, this is a packed Mishnah, and second, there's a lot going on. How do these things relate to each other? And particularly this intro. Shimon b'no Omer, Shimon his son. Why is it so important for us to know who, Shimon b'no, he's the son of somebody? I mean, that's nice and interesting, but how is that relevant to the teaching? And moreover, what's with the intro of Kol yamai gadalti ben hachachamim? My whole life I've been raised among the chachamim. I mean, your father's Rabban Gamliel, right? I mean, where else are you going to be? And moreover, I mean, you're a Tana in your own right. I would assume that Shimon would have spent a lot of time among the chachamim. Why is this so important? And moreover, how does that lead him to I found nothing better for the body than silence? Why? How do those things connect? And moreover, how does this first part of the Mishnah flow into the next? And it's not study that's the main thing, but action. And speaking excessively brings about sin. And in fact, I would think that this v'chol ha'arbeh dvarim mevichet should come right after that. I found nothing better than silence. And if you speak too much, it'll come about sin. That makes sense. That seems to flow naturally. But we almost get interrupted in the middle. So these are all questions, or many of these questions are questions raised by the Maharal. And we'll see what he has to say. So first, Shimon b'no Omer. Shimon b'no, his son. Whose son? The son of who? Rabban Gamliel, who taught the previous Mishnah. Now, Rabban Gamliel said something very particular, and Shimon b'no is really coming to internalize that and to really kind of flesh that out, or bring out the results. Well, what is that? So Rabban Gamliel says like this. Rabban Gamliel haya Omer, aseh lacharav, make yourself a rabbi, v'yistalek min hasafek, and separate yourself from doubt, v'al tarveh la'aser amadot, and do not tithe by estimates on a regular basis, right? Often, a lot. So what's this all going to teach us? So it says the Maharal, Shimon, having seen what his father was like, and how he constantly internalized this idea of, how does he say? He says, "Natan musar la'adam, shiyu ma'asav kemo sheraui la'adam ba'al sechel, shelo yelech bechoshech kemo she'yitbarech." Right? A person who's a ba'al sechel, who's led by his head, by his mind, don't walk around in the dark. That's what we're learning from this. When Shimon b'no saw his father, he was constantly emphasizing, you need to have a mentor, you have to have a rabbi, you have to have some kind of guide, a person who's able to help guide us. So that's great. I mean, we're talking about our personal life. Something that's very unclear what we should do. Should we take the offer for a larger sum of money, or that'll demand all of our time, or take the less demanding job, but we'll be okay. But we'll be able to spend more time with our family, with our learning, with our other priorities, right? Should we have more kids or less kids? Where should we live? These are huge decisions. What school should we send our kids to? In our personal lives, right? How much time should I spend? All these issues that confront us on a regular basis, it's important to have someone who could help guide us. And it's not only that, they're also obviously just in terms of our learning, when we want to get clarity. It's a terrible thing to be in doubt. We're not actively being a Baal Sech. We're not leading with our heads, because our heads aren't fully functioning because we're constantly in doubt. Or that in the case where we are in doubt. And moreover, v'yistalek min hasafek, and he's literally saying it, and distance yourself from doubt. Don't only have a guide for positive things, but also avoid the negative, which is doubt, uncertainty. And moreover, v'al tarveh la'aser amudot, right? Do not make a habit of making tithes by estimates, because you're not sure. It's kind of unclear how much I have to take. I'll just take a little more, I'll take a little less. That's not the way to behave. But why not? What's so bad about being in doubt? So actually, the Gemara says that there's no joy of the resolution of doubts. Now, why is that? Because imagine a person who's racked by, do I live here, or do I move to Israel? Do I go to school, or do I keep working for now? Do we have another kid or not? What happens is you've effectively kind of lost the when we're thinking those kinds of things, when we're not sure what to do, often we just kind of end up in a paralysis because we have no idea where we're supposed to go. And so what happens is, once we've resolved those difficulties, you're kind of able to move full force ahead because now you know where you're going. But when you're not, you're stuck in a state of paralysis. So there's this constant emphasis by Rabban Gamliel to come to a point of certainty. You have to know, make things clear. Be certain of what you're doing. Distance yourself from doubt. Make sure you have a mentor to help guide you. Don't make a habit of constantly guesstimating things. That's not the way to operate. And so Shimon ben Noah is really internalizing this. Now, how does that lead to like v'lo matzati laguf tov mishtika? Because the Maharal understands this not literally. He means since man is a ba'al guf, since a person is encapsulated in a body, so as a ba'al guf, there's nothing better than silence. Again, well, why? What's the connection between these things? Because when a person is a ba'al guf, what happens is he's constantly kind of reduced again to that kind of more limited plane. He's not being led by his sechel, by his mind, by his brain. And the reason why sound is so important for this is because when a person speaks, right, Maharal makes a distinction between speaking and the sechel. And when a person speaks, that's a physical action of sorts, and your brain isn't able to function at full capacity. We've all been in a place where a tough question is posed to us. We're in a situation where we really need to kind of make a decision, and we have to just give me a second. Let me think about this. We need silence to be able to kind of allow our mind to flesh out the options, to think about the consequences, move a few steps ahead. What are you thinking? We need silence for that. And so since a person's a ba'al guf, a person is kind of rooted in the physical world, is rooted by this kind of action, which is what speaking here represents, silence. Better silence, you'll be able to think, you'll be about sechel, and through that process you'll be able to kind of reduce the amount of doubt, you'll be able to kind of come to a more clear conclusion and keep moving forward. And that's the idea here. He's saying, Shimon ben Omer, I spent my entire life among the Chachamim, among the sages. I've never found anything better for us as human beings with bodies than silence. Silence, just clarify the issues. But there's a risk. If we think that, right, obviously, so what would you think is the best? Midrash, to learn. The best measure, stay, learn. That's the best thing. It's so important. It's absolutely critical. So says Shimon ben Noah, no, lo midrash ve'ikar. Midrash is not the main thing. Don't forget, it's maaseh. We have to do. It's about performing. Being a Jew is not only about thinking. Thinking is critically important, right? You have to have the proper theory in order to allow that theory to lead into action, but it's the action that's critical. And we say naaseh v'nishma, right? We do and we hear or learn. Or there are many explanations for what that means, but there's the yesod, the foundation of action at the root of it all. And in fact, that's what I want to bring up, something that very interesting that Rav Bernstein points out. I never even thought about this, but it's so obvious once you hear it, is this idea that it says, which one's greater? Is it doing actions or learning? So Gedolah Torah, Torah learning is the best, is the most important, because it brings us to Maaseh. So Bernstein says, and he points out, he says there are multiple commentators that speak about that, raise this question and then answer it. That's difficult to understand. We're saying learning is the best. It's the most important. Why? Because it brings you to action. Well, if that's true, then it seems like action is the best, right? Because why are you learning? In order to do the action. The whole point of learning is to lead to action. So it seems like action is the most important thing to do, right? Because that's where it's supposed to lead you. So how do we resolve that? I don't know. I just saw the comment in his book, The Call of Sinai. I saw his footnote that had multiple commentators, Mefarshim, who speak about this issue. I haven't looked it up. I really want to. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. But that's the question. But here, Shimon is telling us, Lo midrash ve'ikar, learning is not the main thing. It's action. Action here is critical. And I'm sure that's kind of tuning in. I would not be surprised if the commentators are dealing with this, bring up this Mishnah. Fine. And then how does this lead us into the final Bav of the Mishnah? Because the Maharal says, this is not necessarily intuitive. You might think, okay, silence is the best. Nobody says that if you're talking, that's a sin. Why is that a sin? What's so bad about talking? Again, it's not the ideal, But just because you're not living the ideal, that doesn't mean that you're, sinning. That's very serious to say something like that. Well, what's the idea here? So Maharal says, it's not about the fact that you're speaking. That's not the problem. The problem isn't that, like, okay, a person's speaking more than like a, he should be more silent, but he speaks too. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't necessarily lead him to sin. What's the issue? It's v'chol hamarbe dvarim mifichet. He's marbe dvarim. He's speaking too much. It's excessive. Why is that such a problem? Because again, Shimon is saying, well, there's guf, right? There's the guf and there's the sechel, right? The guf is talking. It's action. That's not good. We want to be sechel. We want to be led by our minds, by our heads, right? By our thought processes. And the more you're acting, the more you're speaking, the less there is of the thinking. And so if you speak a bit more, okay, fine. So you're like not thinking as much, but you're still like, okay. What happens is when a person starts to speak excessively, what he's made speaking the main thing. He's actually created, the sechel is secondary, and the speaking is the main thing, is the action is the main thing. I'm a bal goof, I'm a goof, and that's what's leading me. And that's what brings chet. Why is that? Because that's a chisaron. When a person does most of the actions, then there's a certain lack in him. And what happens is, says the Maharal, one lack is goreret another lack. Chisaron goreret chisaron. Right? Once you're lacking, a person starts to spiral. And then, one of the actual explanations for a chet is a chisaron. He quotes at least two psukim here to prove it, one in Chumash and one in Nach. But how we see the idea of like a chet is a chisaron, and that's how it is. When a person speaks too much and he's made himself mostly a balguf and almost secondarily a speaker, a bal sechel, so now he has a chisaron, he has a lacking, and that's what brings the chet. We'll leave it over there.